Alright, this is a quick video. I want to show you on a little trick I learned from little Susie Orman, which I'm sure that everyone's heard of her by now. Ormans or whatever. Anyhow, this I was looking online all over for credit consolidation and how to get your credit cards paid off, and what if you do can't afford it, because I'm like everyone else, I'm broke. And first off, this video is not trying to sell you something. You're not going to see any links on the bottom of my page saying click on this and I'll show you in great detail. I'm just telling you what I did, and it worked for me, and it'll work for you too, because I'm going to show you that what the banks are doing is really fraudulent, and that's why you can do it. Anyhow, this video is great. Just do exactly what she says, and you'll get your credit back faster than if you weren't, because I did it, and I mean after I finally settled, which this will explain you how to do it on your own. After I finally settled, I was actually on Amazon, and it said you can get a 50% off coupon or some ridiculous thing if you sign up for this credit card. You don't even have to get the credit card. So I was like, great, I'm not going to get the credit card anyhow, so I'll sign up for it. I signed up for it, and a month later I got a credit card in the mail for $3,000, and my credit was $500 before I did this. So anyhow, like I said, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Watch the video. You can do it yourself and knock yourself out. All right.
People out there who are finding yourselves not able to pay your credit card debt, thinking, oh, look what I got in the mail. Here's a company that says if I go to them, they can get me out of this credit card debt. They can settle this debt for me. Well, now I want you to listen to me, because I do not want you to do that. You can do something on your own that will cost you a lot less. Listen up. When you go to a debt settlement company, what they do is they have you not pay your credit cards for a long period of time. Now, that's not a big deal because you're already not paying your credit cards. But you take whatever money you can, you give it to them, so they save it for you. You usually have to pay them $700, $1,000 up front. They then finally make a settlement with the credit card company, usually for 40, 50, 60 cents on the dollar. Whatever they settle for, you then have to also pay them a percentage, so they make their money that way. You've settled your debt with the credit card company, and you're off and running. Here's the thing, everybody. When you don't have money, $700 or $800 up front is a lot of money. It's more money than you have, number one. Number two, the credit card companies are willing to settle with you directly.
Okay, we're going to go back to that in a second. Right now I want to show you this little clip from Zeitgeist to kind of show you how the bank and the Federal Reserve works, so you get a little better understanding about that. Then we'll go back to Susie Orman in a second to finish her spiel up, and you can get a better idea of how I did what I did and how you can do what you do, and everyone works out. The banks get paid, you get paid, you get your credit card back. You don't have to be stuck in this hole all the time, and everything's beautiful again.
A number of years ago, the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, produced a document entitled Modern Money Mechanics. This publication detailed the institutionalized practice of money creation as utilized by the Federal Reserve and the web of global commercial banks it supports. On the opening page, the document states its objective. The purpose of this booklet is to describe the basic process of money creation in a fractional reserve banking system. It then proceeds to describe this fractional reserve process through various banking terminology, a translation of which goes something like this. The United States government decides it needs some money, so it calls up the Federal Reserve and requests, say, $10 billion. The Fed replies saying, sure, we'll buy $10 billion in government bonds from you. So the government takes some pieces of paper, paints some official-looking designs on them, and calls them treasury bonds. Then it puts a value on these bonds to the sum of $10 billion and sends them over to the Fed. In turn, the people at the Fed draw up a bunch of impressive pieces of paper themselves, only this time calling them Federal Reserve notes, also designating a value of $10 billion to the Fed. The Fed then takes these notes and trades them for the bonds. Once this exchange is complete, the government then takes the $10 billion in Federal Reserve notes and deposits it into a bank account. And upon this deposit, the paper notes officially become legal tender money, adding $10 billion to the U.S. money supply. And there it is. $10 billion in new money has been created. Now, government bonds are, by design, instruments of debt. And when the Fed purchases these bonds, with money it essentially created out of thin air, the government is actually promising to pay back that money to the Fed. In other words, the money was created out of debt. So, the exchange has been made and now $10 billion sits in a commercial bank account. Here's where it gets really interesting. For as based on the fractional reserve practice, that $10 billion deposit instantly becomes part of the bank's reserves, just as all deposits do. And regarding reserve requirements, as stated in modern money mechanics, a bank must maintain legally required reserves equal to a prescribed percentage of its deposits. It then quantifies this by stating, under current regulations, the reserve requirement against most transaction accounts is 10%. This means that with a $10 billion deposit, 10% or $1 billion is held as the required reserve, while the other $9 billion is considered an excessive reserve and can be used as the basis for new loans. Now, it is logical to assume that this $9 billion is literally coming out of the existing $10 billion deposit. However, this is actually not the case. What really happens is that the $9 billion is simply created out of thin air on top of the existing $10 billion deposit. This is how the money supply is expanded. As stated in modern money mechanics, of course they, the banks, do not really pay out loans from the money they receive as deposits. If they did this, no additional money would be created. What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes, loan contracts, in exchange for credits, money, to the borrower's transaction accounts. In other words, the $9 billion can be created out of nothing simply because there is a demand for such a loan and that there is a $10 billion deposit to satisfy the reserve requirements. Now, let's assume that somebody walks into this bank and borrows the newly available $9 billion. They will then most likely take that money and deposit it into their own bank account. The process then repeats, for that deposit becomes part of the bank's reserves. 10% is isolated, and in turn 90% of the $9 billion, or $8.1 billion, is now available as newly created money for more loans. And of course, that 8.1 can be loaned out and redeposited, creating an additional 7.2 billion, to 6.5 billion, to 5.9 billion, etc. This deposit money creation loan cycle can technically go on to infinity. The average mathematical result is that about $90 billion can be created on top of the original 10 billion. In other words, for every deposit that ever occurs in the banking system, about 9 times that amount can be created out of thin air. As dysfunctional and backwards as all of this might seem, there is still one thing we have omitted from this equation. And it is this element of the structure which reveals the truly fraudulent nature of the system itself. The application of interest. When the government borrows money from the Fed, or when a person borrows money from a bank, it almost always has to be paid back with accrued interest. In other words, almost every single dollar that exists must be eventually returned to a bank with interest paid as well. But if all money is borrowed from the central bank and is expanded by commercial banks through loans, only what would be referred to as the principal is being created in the money supply. So then, where is the money to cover all of the interest that is charged? Nowhere. It doesn't exist. The ramifications of this are staggering, for the amount of money owed back to the banks will always exceed the amount of money that is available in circulation. This is why inflation is a constant in the economy, for new money is always needed to help cover the perpetual deficit built into the system, caused by the need to pay the interest. What this also means is that mathematically, defaults and bankruptcy are literally built into the system, and there will always be poor pockets of society that get the short end of the stick. An analogy would be a game of musical chairs, for once the music stops, somebody is left out to dry. And that's the point.
So if you find that you are in a situation where you are already behind, it's already been charged off, or it's gone to a collection agency, or it's about to, if you do have some money, let's say you owe $17,000, $24,000 to some credit card company that's now in collection, if you have $6,000, $7,000, don't be surprised that if you called the collection agency directly, that they won't settle with you. Of course they will. They rather get something rather than nothing. So it is very, very important to understand you have what it takes to do this on your own. Now, if you do it on your own, I want you to follow these steps. If you make a settlement, you are not to pay that settlement with a check from your personal bank account. Do you understand? You are to pay it with either a cashier's check or a money order. I do not want these companies to know your bank that you happen to be banking with. On the check, you are to write, if this check is cashed, that makes this account, put your account number, settled in full. Number two, when you do that, you are to also ask them, if you are to settle this debt, you want it to appear on your credit report that this debt is paid in full. You do not want the words settled. You want paid in full, because if the credit report says settled, future creditors will know that this is an account that you obviously settled on and that therefore you are a high risk. So you don't want that to happen. Next, if you are settling a debt yourself with a collection agency that purchased that debt from your original creditor, you also want to know that the original creditor can never come back at you for the difference of what you settled and what you originally owed. So you need to get all of that in writing. And last but not least, you need to understand that it is possible that you will owe income taxes on the amount of money you settled for and the original amount of money that you owed. So let's say you owed $20,000, you settled for $7,000. It's possible that you could owe taxes on that $13,000 difference. Therefore, you should always ask the collection agency to please state that you will not owe taxes on this money. And if they won't state that, also understand that if you are insolvent, which means you owe more than what you have, technically the IRS is not going to make you pay taxes on it. So check it all out so you don't spend money that you don't have. If you do all that, you don't need one of these debt settlement companies, and it will save you a lot of money.
All right, so that's it in a nutshell. Take with it what you want. I'm telling you that it did work for me, and I've done it about 3 times now with me and my wife's credit cards, and now we both have credit that we'll never use, but we got it, and it really blew me away. And at the time, I already knew how the financial market worked, so I just didn't care. And then I figured if I had the money, I'll do it. And then I saw her video and I was like, well, cool, let's try it. So now I have credit cards. If something comes up, hopefully I'll never ever have to use them. But if I did and I do it again, I would do it again. I don't care. They're the ones who are getting the financial bailouts and making billions and billions of dollars and then sending that money offshores, and they're the ones who are crashing our economy. So why would we care about them? All right. Talk to you later. Please, if you like this video, subscribe and comment and click like. It helps me out a lot. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Have a good day.
During the American Civil War, President Lincoln bypassed the high-interest loans offered by the European banks and decided to do what the Founding Fathers advocated, which was to create an independent and inherently debt-free currency. It was called the greenback. Shortly after this measure was taken, an internal document circulated between private British and American banking interests stated, "Slavery is but the owning of labor and carries with it the care of laborers, while the European plan is that capital shall control labor by controlling wages. This can be done by controlling the money. It will not do to allow the greenback, as we cannot control that.